Hello, everybody. I, Unnati Singh, SAS Woman of Indore, welcome you all to the another session of Bright Circle Indore, an initiative of Prabha Khetan Foundation presented by Sri Cement Limited. Prabha Khetan Foundation is an organization based in Kolkata, founded by late Dr. Prabha Khetan. The foundation is dedicated to promote performing art, culture, education, literature, gender equality, and women's empowerment. It collaborates with caregivers, committed individuals, and the like-minded institutions to implement cultural, educational, literary, and social welfare projects in India. Today we have among us an international star and a man among men, Mr. Kabir Bedi. Kabir's credits include starring with uh, Michael Caine in Ashanti and Brody McDowell in Thief of Baghdad, and playing the title role in the Italian film The Black Corsair. In American television, he has acted in Highlander, Murder, She Wrote, Magnum PI, Dynasty, and in multiple HBO miniseries. On stage, he starred in John Miller's Taj at the Cumulato Festival in Canada and MMK's Far Pavilions in London's West End. In India, he has done close to 70 Bollywood films, famously starring with Rekha ji in Khoon Bhari Maang. In conversation with him is Miss Parveen Tuli, SAS Woman of Nagpur. Now I will request the audience to sit back, relax, enjoy the conversation. Welcome, Kabir ji.
Thank you. Thank you for the lovely introduction. Look forward to our chat today.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, it is an immense pleasure to really even sit here and have a conversation with such a great personality. And everybody, like everything that was there in the introduction, was just an introduction of all your milestones and successes. But going through your book, it has been a huge roller coaster life of having a grand and glorious adventure that you call as your life. So, welcome, Mr. Kabir Bedi. And the stories I must tell, which is an autobiography of Mr. Kabir Bedi. And especially, there is a tagline which is the emotional life of an actor. So, let us explore not only the book and a lot of stories in there, but also the life of uh, Mr. Kabir Bedi, which is absolutely a life of adventure in itself. So, welcome, Mr. Kabir Bedi.
Thank you,
So we
Parveen.
have,
Thank you so much.
yeah. So your story begins with like you have really encapsulated short stories in this book in your book, and one of the questions that while I was going through the book was like, where did this unconventional way of living came from? And as we know that you are a descendant of Guru Nanak, and your mother, Freda Bedi, who actually been a nun in her later age of life, and looking at that level of spirituality in your beginning years really made it very clear for me that, oh, so the seeds were sown and the impact actually begin in the beginning years of your life. Would you like to talk about your upbringing and your parents as from your on? Like, how did it impacted your upbringing and your way, unconventional way of living a life ahead?
I mean, all of us are affected by who our parents are, what they give us, the values they give us, the examples they set us. And I was very fortunate to have parents that were truly idealists. They gave up virtually everything for, firstly, the freedom of the country. They were Oxford graduates, could have had the best jobs in the country, but they sacrificed it all to fight for India's freedom with very little money in their pockets. So it was really hard, and yet they did it. My mother was a handpicked satyagrahi of Mahatma Gandhi, and my father was a communist and later advisor to Sheikh Abdullah in Kashmir. But these were people that who followed the calling of their spirit. And after independence was achieved, unlike many of their contemporaries, they didn't go for political rewards and become ministers and chief ministers. They chose to continue their exploration, and they moved to religion. And my mother found Buddhism. My father became a philosopher in his own right. But through them all, what I learned was that you can live a very unconventional life and still thrive and still survive. You don't have to follow the beaten track. That confidence I got from my parents. So your opening question was, where did your unconventional life come from? Was it the influence of your parents? Of course it was. They gave me the courage. They showed me that you can live an unconventional life. You don't have to follow the usual track of professions that many people do. Nothing wrong with that. But if you choose to be different, you can. But I was also a person who came of age in the 60s, a time of great social and political ferment. There were cultures being changed around the world. The cultural, social, economic, even sexual revolution that was happening with the invention of the pill and the coming of the age of the hippies and people demonstrating for peace for the first time in history. Those kind of changes affected us all, even here in faraway India. And we wanted to be part of that change and revolution. And within me, there was always a sense of wanting to be different. I always had this itch to do something different, and that was always with me. So some of my decisions came from necessity. I mean, I worked with All India Radio because I had to pay my way through college at St. Stephen's. The decision to leave Delhi happened because I was disillusioned with All India Radio. And then, as I always say, fortune favors the brave. मैदान जंग में उतरेंगे तभी पता चलेगा आपको whether you would be favored or not. So that urge to be different was always within me, and I always followed that inner voice that led me from one thing to another, from Delhi to Mumbai with 700 rupees in my pocket, from Mumbai, from advertising to theatre to film, etc. So that's been part of my DNA, and that's what set me on that road to a very different career.
Yeah, and we are grateful for you choosing different, because you actually opened a lot of pathways for other people to allow themselves to be different. And looking at your career choices as well, like you are not a very conventional actor of dancing and singing, which was very common in that era, but you actually chose a career path at that era where Asians never choose to move out. The way the pathways were not yet made. So what really invited you to choose careers which was so unconventional, and as well as going to Italy and after being successful in the Bollywood industry, what made you choose to make decisions which were as risky as going to a different continent and creating a new path?
Oh boy, there's a lot of questions in that one question you asked. I came to Bombay to be a filmmaker. That was what I wanted to do. And I worked in advertising as a filmmaker. And I made lots of ad films and was appreciated for them. But because I did theatre, it led to my being given film offers. Film offers, I thought, chalo industry mein ghus to jao, aadmi dekhte hain kya hota hai, filmmaker ban jayenge. But that ban jayenge never happened. Because firstly, I had a hit film with Raj Khosla's Kache Dhage and various things happened there. And I said, okay, I can make, but the problem was that I didn't want to sing and dance. I didn't want to be a singing and dancing star. I fancied myself as a serious actor. That was a big mistake because the heroes of the time have to sing and dance. That was the rule.
Yeah.
Music is part of Bollywood and I love it. I love watching it. I just don't like doing it. I enjoy watching all the great song and dance numbers. I think nobody in the world does them better. But it wasn't me. So when, due to a number of circumstances, which are all in my book, I was called to audition in Italy for this role of this Asian pirate who fights the British called Sandokan. I went, I gave it everything I had, and I got the role. The way it happened, it turned out to be the biggest hit. It broke every television record in Europe. And that journey is also an extraordinary journey. How a middle-class boy from Delhi suddenly finds himself in Europe as a European star. And Europe is no less than America. Unfortunately, we're also America and England centered, even in our news. We just care about news from there. We don't worry about news from Italy, Germany, France, etc. We just, this kind of Anglo-Saxon view of the world. But the fact was, it was an enormous achievement to become a star in Europe, which in population is no less than the whole of America. And that was, in a sense, the easy part. The hard part was saying, now this is done, I'm going to push the envelope and go to Hollywood. And all the experiences and dramas of what happened in Italy and my relationship with Parveen Babi, which is happening at the same time, and the dilemmas that created for me, all those I've shared with great lucidity in my book and form a very important part of my story. But then, every actor in the commercial cinema business dreams of going to Hollywood. And I thought, why not? The problem was that they weren't writing roles for Indians at the time. And so I had to diversify and become a foreign actor in general. And it was hard work. Priyanka Chopra launched my book. And I'm really grateful to her that she said that I'm the one who paved the way for Indian actors to showcase their talent globally. Because of the protests that we made at the time, and subsequent to me, other people too, diversity did become an agenda in Hollywood. Writing for different ethnicities became mandatory in Hollywood. They began to see the rest of the world in terms of a wider market. In those days, they didn't care what happened beyond America. So times have changed, roles are written. That does not in any way take away from the success of Priyanka Chopra, because this is not an easy business. You don't get roles handed to you on a plate. She fought very hard for her success, but it was a little easier because they were writing roles that were more diverse. And the biggest problem for an actor is, if a role isn't written for you, how do you get to play it? And that is the dilemma that I faced.
Yeah.
But still, I went there. I got some great roles. I was in the Bond film. I was in Ashanti with Michael Caine. I got some terrific television series. But in Hollywood, I never became the grand star. In Europe, I sure was. And that was a dilemma in itself. That here I was doing auditions in Hollywood while being celebrated as a major star in Europe. And but I must thank Bollywood, because even though my career has not largely been in Bollywood, they did make me an all-India name. They did give me a hit film that made me recognized by the entire audience that sees Bollywood films. I became a name. And because I was a name, when the Italians came into town looking for potential actors for their thing, I was put into consideration. Had it not been for Bollywood, that would never have happened. So I will never, ever talk badly of Bollywood. They gave me my opening in life. They've always given me great respect. Since coming back to India, I've done 2 films with Shah Rukh, 2 films with Hrithik Roshan, 1 film with Akshay Kumar. So they've always given me work, and they've given me a lot of respect. So Bollywood, I don't diss. But yes, it does take a lot of courage to push the envelope and go beyond the familiar and safe to try out untested waters. And as you saw in my book, decades later, it got me into a lot of trouble as well. And I had to literally resurrect myself from the ruins of that. I can't tell it all in one soundbite, but that's part of my journey.
Absolutely. And I think with every chapter that you've really written, it's so much of real presence of you living the chapters again and making the reader so cinematically it's done that each and every sense of yours is really engaged in the whole story. As I was telling you, it is really designed. Yeah. So it's like I was actually looking at like how we are so excited for the OT platforms and the Netflix series. Every day, like I was so excited to look at the next chapter and the next page, and it was absolutely captivating. So,
that was my intention. I want to tell you, Parveen, that was my intention. Sorry. That was my intention because when I tried writing the book, I tried a few drafts and I just got bored. I said, I'm not interested in this. I wanted a book that was riveting. I wanted a book where, like you said, you're interested in what happens in the next chapter, in the next paragraph, in the next, it should, you shouldn't be able to put it down. And the greatest compliment I get from my book is two things. One is that it's very honest, and secondly, that's unputdownable. I think those are the hallmarks of a book that means something, that touches you in some way, involves you in some way. And to that extent, I'm most grateful that what I set out to do, I did. And it seemed to have worked beyond my expectations, because the reviews I've got have been just extraordinary. If you go onto my Amazon page, you'll see a selection of them. No writer could hope for better reviews, at least in terms of the first book. It's extraordinary.
Absolutely. And that is what, because all we knew Kabir Bedi as a star, as a larger than life figure, and as a Bollywood star. And one of the most controversial spaces in your life have been your relationship with different strong willed women. And I would really like you to walk our audiences with the journey of your journey with Pratima Bedi as well as Parveen Bobby. And gradually, like, you actually chose women who were absolutely strong willed and totally uniquely different in their own ways. And my question to you is, what were you looking for there in relationships that kept your insatiable appetite? And what were you yearning for that kept you really looking for more?
I always like strong women. I like women who have a good sense of themselves and their center and their kind of place in the world and the universe. My mother was a kind, compassionate woman, but she was also a very strong woman. She was, as you'll see in my book, became the gateway of Buddhism to the West by the institutions she set up and the lamas she trained. You don't do that without being a very strong person. A woman who renounced her family to become a Buddhist nun, that's a strong woman. I've always had strong women. Pratima was a strong woman, creative, wild, assertive, full of life. Parveen was a strong woman, Parveen Babi. She was beautiful and sensitive and caring and intelligent, clouded by mental issues, but a strong woman, a girl who came from Junagadh and became a major star in Bollywood. Doesn't just happen to any person. You have to be pretty strong to withstand that. Even my daughter Pooja is a strong woman. My granddaughter Alaya, who just won the Filmfare Award for Best Debut Actress for her film Jawani Janeman, she's a strong woman. So I like strong women. That's sort of part of me. But what I've always sought in a relationship is also to have a sense of companionship, to have a sense of being part of a team, to have someone that I can love and that loves me, to have a feeling of emotional fulfillment. And sometimes things don't work out because people change or circumstances change or emotions change or whatever it takes. And all the things that led to the breakdown of those relationships are chronicled in my book, each for very different reasons. But it's always been a source of great pride to me that despite the fact that relationships have ended in my life, I remain friends with all the women that have ever been in my life. And there's a wonderful picture of me at Christmas in my Santa Monica house with Nikki, my wife at the time, sitting with Pratima and Ishelle, my American wife, and all sharing a Christmas dinner together. That spirit of mutual respect and understanding, if that can continue, then it speaks a lot about all the people involved in that relationship. You know, Nikki didn't want to come back to India. She wanted to live in England. I didn't want to stay in England. The only people benefiting from that were airline companies and telephone companies. You're on the phone all the time. You're traveling all the time. And eventually neither is in the place they want to be. And therefore, eventually people start leading separate lives. So you adjust to that. You say, okay, this is not working. You know, Sahir Ludhianvi had a beautiful saying. He said, "Jis afsane ko anjam pe lana na ho mumkin." That story that cannot be brought to its conclusion. जिस अफसाने को अंजाम पर लाना ना हो मुमकिन, उसे एक खूबसूरत मोड़ पर छोड़ देना बेहतर.
Wow.
So the thing is, the thing is, some things don't last for a lifetime. But if they are not to last, then at least leave it at a beautiful bend in the road. And I always found those beautiful bends in the road in relationships that didn't endure. And the sign of that beautiful bend is the fact that we remain friends. Even after Parveen left me, I didn't leave her. She left me and came back to India. We'd gone abroad together. And why all that's in my book, but you must read that.
Absolutely.
But we remained in touch. And then for years she disappeared. And then I met her just a few years before she passed away at the holiday. And there's another very poignant meeting, which I've described in my book. And I was there for her funeral. So not all things last a lifetime, but how you handle the separation, what is the fallout from that separation, those are things that are within your power.
Yes, and truly, I mean, like when I looked at relationships, and this was like years back, and looking at you really choosing to have, that's what I say, which is larger than really create better relationships afterwards as well. Also, can somebody mute? Can somebody mute here? I'm
Can
not sure
everyone
who is.
mute their,
Thank you.
yeah, because we're hearing all kinds
Yeah.
of chatter in the background.
Thank you so much. Also, being a man and being so emotionally really expressive in the book that you've written, you've this has been a huge eye-opener for a woman to read a book where you are really expressing each and every emotion when it comes to whether it's your relationship with your partner or whether it's your relationship with your children. And one of the chapters that moved me personally was your chapter when you're writing about Siddharth and the other kids as well, but it's more like around Siddharth and uh, how he was in a space of mental illness, which was schizophrenic, and the whole depiction of everything that you've written there is such a heart wrenching, and it's such a space of really looking at mental illness from a different space. So I would like
Yes.
you to talk about more about writing that chapter, and was it easy to revisit every moment that, because you've really explained it beautifully, scene by scene, and it really touched our hearts. So we would love to know more about that.
It certainly was not easy to write that chapter because I had to go back and relive that whole experience. And the experience was not just about my son's mental illness. It's the story. That story is the story of a father trying to prevent his son from committing suicide. And you can imagine the emotion that goes through you in that process. Because there's nothing more traumatic than the loss of a child and the fear of the loss of a child. And I begin that chapter with my son talking to me about suicide as we walk on the beach. And I suddenly realized that this is a very different and dangerous area we're entering. And I have to change his mindset. And everything I did to try and do that. But, leaving aside that chapter, because I won't leave that chapter right now, it was very difficult to go back into all the emotions, all the scenes, which I've portrayed very vividly, so that people can share that experience with me of what happens to the afflicted, what happens to the caregiver, what happens when you are confronted with a situation like that, the decisions you have to make, the impossibility of being the enforcer, the person who has to make them do what they're supposed to do, and the dilemmas that causes. So it's a very heartfelt chapter, but as you notice, even in my chapters on Parveen and Pratima, I have laid bare my emotions throughout the whole process. And the fact of the matter is, men are to be pitied in a sense, because men often see themselves as having to be the strong one, the macho one, the one who takes care of it all. When people break down around, don't worry, it'll all be well, I'll be there for you, don't worry, etc. Be the protector, be the gallant one, be the rock of Gibraltar. But men have emotions too. Yeah. Men also have a lot of emotions, but they're not good at expressing them. Women are much better at expressing their emotions. And so a lot of men's emotions get bottled in. And let me say that in real life, I'm also a bit like that. But it doesn't mean I don't feel those emotions. So when I sat down to write it, I gave myself the freedom to express my emotions, the way I felt them, the way I sensed them, the way I suffered them, the way I enjoyed them, all that. I said, just say it and tell it like it is, because people need to know what a man goes through in those situations. And mine were highly volatile situations at times. Mine were highly complicated moral decisions at times. There were all kinds of dilemmas I faced. And I told myself, just tell it honestly and tell it authentically and tell it in a way whereby people can relate to you, because people can smell bullshit, you know.
Yeah, totally.
If you tell it like it is, it'll resonate somewhere. You'll feel that, yeah, abhi jhoot nahi bol raha. This is a true emotion, because each emotion comes from each situation. So I regard it as a great success when you say to me that you felt those emotions, you experienced the emotions, whether it's to do with my relationships, emotional love relationships, romantic relationships, or the relationship with my son, or relationships when I had the euphoric success of Italy, or the enormously traumatic emotions I went through when I had setbacks in some of my later years in Hollywood. All those things, the book is alive for you, because you feel what I feel. And that's what I set out to do. And I'm glad it evoked this reaction in you.
Absolutely. There are a few chapters that I went and reread it to really get it, because there are stories inside that were resonating. There were stories and emotions inside which were unexpressed. And your book is actually a way of healing those spaces. Yeah.
Healing?
So I would.
Healing, yes, is a good word. Healing, it was also cathartic, but it was also revelatory. I was able to look back on the younger Kabir and say, this is what you felt. Perhaps you shouldn't have felt that. Perhaps you should have reacted differently at the time. I can see myself with compassion over time. And that's the beauty of writing a book with today's wisdom, that I can give it a certain perspective. It's not written sort of with, I'll get even with so on. So there's no malice in my book towards anybody. If they, screwed up, I tell it. If I screwed up, I tell it. There's no malice. It's just telling you the way it happened. And that rawness has touched people.
So the next question that I have for you is your quest for life, your curiosity and quest for life. Like, there is a chapter where you're talking about your beliefs, your journey of you have been for a small time a monk, and your quest for life and your quest for truth. And we would love to know your journey towards, and I would love to say that even in that space, you're insatiable. That's why you're always in question and asking for more. So how does you see yourself from the space of spirituality? And how much of that is in your way of living?
For me, as you just know, from my father's side, my mother's side, there was spirituality. The descent of Guru Baba Nanak, my father had the Sikh tradition, which I was taught. Everything in Buddhism, my mother taught me. My own experiences as a Buddhist monk and meditation taught me many things. But there was always this curiosity, about what is the truth of life. Now, let me just say one thing. I have nothing against organized religion. I think it's a beautiful thing. It gives people great rights at the times of birth, marriage, death, It gives people a sense of belonging, a sense of community. It creates a universal belief that gives you great satisfactions. If you're doing a little arti in front of a murti, there's something being touched inside you. You're touching the spiritual inside you. So I never knock traditional religion. I see its role, I see its purpose, and I understand its great beauty. But there's a part of me that's the seeker. What's the truth?
Yeah.
Jesus Christ, Prophet Muhammad, Krishna, Buddha, all say wonderful things, but philosophically they're saying different things. Somebody's saying there's heaven and earth. Somebody's saying there's not.
Yeah.
Somebody's saying there's rebirth. Somebody's saying there's not. Somebody's saying there's a soul. Somebody's saying there's not. Free will, destiny. What is the truth of the matter? This has always been part of my life's quest. And I went to many gurus that were anti-gurus, anti-religion, people like Jiddu Krishnamurti, went to the great interpreters of religion like Osho, went to the great modern day philosophers like Deepak Chopra, read the great works of Swami Vivekananda, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, I went to a Christian school, I looked at Hinduism in many ways, and I got some of my deepest answers in Hinduism. But I had this perpetual quest. So at the end of my journey so far, I could discover something completely different tomorrow, I don't know. But I put down what my beliefs are. Yes, I believe in free will. Yes, I believe in a soul. Yes, I believe in rebirth, but I'm not sure it happens for all. Yes,
And absolute pearls of wisdoms. Those are real pearls of wisdoms. If anybody is looking for some life answers and quest for like what life is all about, I think that chapter it will really reveal a lot of what resonates with a lot of questions that each one of us really have.
And where does it all come from? Where does it all come from? So I've addressed those. And I think people will find that, with any philosophical bent of mind, would find that chapter very, very interesting. Because there are also great teachers like Seth from the Seth material by Jane Roberts, who really gives great insights into alternate realities as well. So I can't condense it in a few soundbites. This is the learning of a lifetime. But my beliefs are sort of fruit salad of beliefs taken from various religions and philosophies. And I said, this sounds true to me, that sounds true to me, I made my little fruit salad. And that feels good to me. But I think it'll make sense to a lot of people too, if they're curious, if they have a questioning mind.
Yeah. And the beauty about the whole book is there are phrases in the book which are so light sides. And the way you had the presence of mind and really went ahead and hacked that interview. Would you like to talk about that incident? Like details, a 19-year-old boy. Yes.
That's what started me out my journey in life, when I beat the whole Delhi press corps to an interview with the Beatles. And the reason I was able to do that was because I was the biggest Beatle fan in the world. I was working for All India Radio to pay my fees in college. And when they came into town, I persuaded my bosses to give me the badge and give me the tape recorder. And they didn't believe I'd get it, but I went there. I found their manager, Brian Epstein. And Brian Epstein was the man to get hold of. And to cut a long story short, I knew his vulnerability because I was a Beatles fan, and I got the information. And I pressured him into giving me that interview. So I was the only one who got through. And what happened in the course of that interview, which is written in full in my book, I'll leave you to enjoy that wonderful interview where I even asked John Lennon about use of drugs. What he said, all that you have to see in my book. But the fallout from that interview was that All India Radio treated it so badly, not only broadcasting it without any fanfare, but even erasing my tapes because they had no money for new tapes, not realizing the gold I'd given them that I could have sold to any broadcaster in the world. That made me think about life and made me think, do I really want to work with such people? Do I really want my life to be spent putting all my energy, all my creativity, all my abilities into this organization, or do I need to move on? And that was a turning point in my life, which made me leave Delhi with 700 rupees in my pocket to seek a new destiny for myself.
Absolutely. And we are glad you did that.
Thank
Also,
you.
I like the way you take relationships from such a different perspective, as well as on a lighter note. Like in many of your interviews, you have also said that, oh, do you know that women marry men because they they think they will
No,
change, and
yeah,
men
and they don't.
marry women. Yes,
Men marry
and
women
it is
thinking
so
they'll change.
funny. Yes,
No, it goes the other way. Women marry men thinking they'll change, and they don't. Men
yes,
marry women thinking they won't change, and they do.
and they do. And the brilliance of this book is there are so many letters in the books. There are so many quotes in the books, which are like real life lessons really going on. And one of the things around the letters, like the letters that your mother really sent it to your father's
Mm.
family and other, these letters are gems of expressions, and it shows how beautifully they have really expressed what they had with so much vulnerability, and the beauty of it was like absolutely astonishing. So
No,
I
Praveen,
love
it's so
what.
important. So it's so important to use letters if you have them, because telling
Yeah.
stories through people's letters in their words in those times, and my mother appealing to my father's family to let let them to allow her to marry him is one of the most touching letters ever
Oh
written.
yes, very
And
beautiful.
this fear and the sheer passion of idealism that's in that letter raises, you get goosebumps reading it. Even the letters of Parveen to me, which I put in the book,
Yes.
Prathima's letters to me, which I put in the book, my son's letters to me, which I put in the book, those letters make things more authentic, more alive, because it's not just me telling you, it's they telling you too, and reinforcing what I'm telling you. It makes it more real and gives people a more immersive experience. So letters and use of them are very important if you have them. And I did.
Yeah, yeah. And I think you have really saved all those letters because every letter is real expression in itself. Beautiful. One of the things that while I was reading the book, I was like, I would like to have a life like this, like meeting people, your acquaintance, your friends, your companions, and like you have an eye for really picking up the most interesting people on planet Earth, and
I've been very
I mean,
lucky
like,
in certain ways, yeah. Meeting the Audrey
yeah.
Hepburns,
So
Fellinis, Michael Caine, Sean
I mean,
Connery, so many people along the way.
so many
Beautiful
people.
people, beautiful places. It's all been part of my journey. It's not all
Yeah,
wine and roses. I mean, there's some rough patches too, which I've also shared, some really rough times. But it's all part of the wondrous journey of being human. This is what my book is about. It's about being human with my frailties, with my successes, with my failures. It's the wondrous journey of living life as a human being.
absolutely. And the heroism in the book is all your vulnerable spaces. Like, really, I mean, like, it was totally awestruck to really see that how can somebody can be so open and honest and really sharing it with the world. So I have few questions for you. Like, which was the easiest chapter for you to write in the book, and which was the toughest one?
The easiest was probably the opening chapter. The opening chapter with growing up in Delhi, the interview with the Beatles, my friendship with Rajiv and Sanjay Gandhi, and what came from that, and all the factors that drove me to Delhi. And that was the easiest chapter to write, because that was sort of what began my life, and I would never forgotten that. The hardest chapter was certainly the chapter on my son and trying to prevent his suicide. But all the chapters were tough to write. All the chapters, because, to go back into the emotional dramas of all my emotional relationships, to revisit the lives of my parents and the remarkable journeys that they had, and what their relationship between them was, even when they were separated by beliefs, even when they were separated by continents. that was also something that took a lot of wonder, but even wonder is hard to write about. And what it was like to be the son of parents like that and how that affected me. I really have to think about that. So the whole process of writing for me overall was a joyful process, but it did take me back into some very dark places, some very sad places, some very moving places. And I'm glad that I did that because I was able to share it. And more than that, it became a kind of closure for me. I came to terms with a lot of things that I wrote about. In that sense, it was cathartic.
Yes. And let's come to your present. And it's been how long that you have been married to Parveen? And how did you met her?
The present Parveen Dosanjh is my wife at present. We've been married for 5 years, but we've been together for 15 years.
Yeah.
And it took a good 10 years to persuade her to actually give me the date for the marriage. And though we were living together, we were like a couple, but I was a repeat offender in her view, so she had to be a little more sure of me before finally tying the knot.
How amazing. And what's next for Kabir Bedi? What's the next leak of life is for Mr. Kabir Bedi? What do you see yourself choosing in the future?
Well, I don't know. I just keep looking for different ways of expressing myself. My life as an actor will continue. That has defined me. That is my identity. I do work internationally and will continue to work internationally. America, Europe, here. I just did a Telugu film, a great epic called Shakuntalam, based on Kalidasa's Shakuntala. So life goes on as an actor. But I certainly think that I will write another book because the reactions to my book will be so enormous and I've got so many more stories to tell that I certainly think I'll write another book. Beyond that, a lot of people have been asking me to come and do motivational speaking and speaking about writing, etc. So all those avenues that things I've done in the past, but I may put more time into them. And I may express my creativity in ways that surprise even me. I don't know. Let's see how it turns out.
We would love to see more of you everywhere. Thank you, Mr. Kabir Bedi. And I will hand over to Unnati Singh maybe. And let's open this platform for questions from the audience. And absolutely grateful and had a pleasure of talking to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Parveen. Thank you.
Thank you so very much, Parveen. And yes, now we have an open house in case if any one of you have questions, we'll be very happy to take them. You may raise your hand or just type it in the chat box.
I think people are too busy thinking about what I just said rather than sitting and writing questions.
I think, they are absolutely, I can see, Deepa Mishra ji, and Deepa Mishra ji is the Ehsaas woman, she's one of our Ehsaas women. And yes, I can see Shehnawaz Sahab, he has a question. Please puchiye, sir.
Shehnawaz, I think you're on mute. I can't hear you. Shehnawaz, we can't hear you.
Yes, Ji, puchiye sir, aap puchiye.
Yes, I'm a great fan of Kabir Sarji, and I have one question. Even I am a salon business management trainer, and I've been thinking of writing a book since 4 years. So I want to ask a question to Kabir sir. How did he really manage to write a book?
When I was sitting down to write a book, thinking of writing the book, and I've been thinking for 10 years, along the way, I asked Khushwant Singh, I said, Kushanji, how do you manage to write so many books? So he said, phone chakke rakh deo. Pick up the phone and put it down. And those days we were talking about the landline, right? So we picked up the phone, put it down, no one could call you. And then he said, you have to make time. Budget a slot of time, 2 hours, 3 hours, 4 hours, 5 hours every day and write. And that's how I got this book done. I cut off all distractions. I created the hours and I wrote dedicatedly, which is why I was able to write this book when the pandemic started. And by the time the second wave came around, my book had released, which is an astonishingly fast time for any book. But basically, if you want to write, be clear what you want to say, for whom you're going to say it, and why it's important for others to read your book. Tell it interestingly and put in the hours day after day, not when you feel like it, but when you've decided to write. That's the way a book gets done. It's a very lonely business, but it does turn out a good result in the end.
Thank you. Okay, I can see loads and loads of hands raised here, of course. So we have, I think, Pooja ji, if I'm not, Pooja Dantre ji. Pooja ji,
Yes.
आप अपने आप को unmute करिए और सवाल पूछिए.
Yes. Thank you so much for letting me ask the question. So, good evening, sir.
Good evening,
It is
Pooja.
not a question, it is a compliment from my side. You have the same great voice. बहुत मन करता है सुनते रहो. And many congratulations to you and giving एक धारा देने के लिए for people like us to live life with the same gusto, regardless of anything this precious gift called life throws you, anything.
Right.
It is the
Quite
same
right.
gusto, and you are doing the same. So it's an inspiration. Thank you so much. And it is an eye treat to see you and an ear treat to listen to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. So wonderfully put. Thank you so much for that. I have a special request for all of you. To all of you who have read my book and liked my book, I would be very grateful if you went onto the Amazon page and actually wrote a review of my book, because those reviews really help in terms of persuading other people to read the book. And if you've enjoyed that experience and you want other people to share that experience, please write a review. It'll help me, it'll help the book, it'll help get the story out.
Sure.
And
Thank you so much.
I've got-
Certainly.
I can be with you for max another 10 minutes because I've got another Zoom session coming up. And I think we started a little late out here.
Yes, absolutely.
But,
We will wind up by 5 in any
Okay.
case.
All
Yes,
right.
I think we can have one more question. A quick question by Supriya ji.
Hello, sir. Firstly, a big
Hi.
thanks to Unnati ji who has given us an opportunity जो हम आपसे directly बात कर सकते हैं आज. And
Shukriya, sir.
I just want to compliment you that yesterday I was watching your movie Khoon Bhari Maang and you forced us to hate you. जो
Yes.
villains हैं उनसे हमारी expectations उस movie के बाद बढ़ गई थी. Such a handsome villain you were.
A lot of people have been scared of me as children from that age.
Exactly,
It took them
sir.
years to realize that he's an actor who plays many roles. उस वक्त तो लगा कि ये
Exactly.
बिल्कुल बहुत डरावना आदमी है, बहुत बुरे काम करता है. But in a sense, I succeeded because that was the intention
Yes.
of playing that role. कि
Sir,
बहुत
my
ही बुरा
question
आदमी
to
है,
you
बहुत बुरे
is-
काम कर सकता है.
Yes. Sir,
Please.
my question to you is, जैसे आपका जो एक पूरी जर्नी रही, खून भरी मांग से लेके मैं हूं ना से लेके काइट्स तक, हर तरीके के रोल आपने किए, मेन लीड रोल, विलेंस, कैरेक्टर आर्टिस्ट, सपोर्टिंग एक्टर्स. So my question to you is that at times I have seen in Indian cinema कि सपोर्टिंग आर्टिस्ट ज्यादा टैलेंटेड होते हैं, उनका रोल ज्यादा मेजर होता है मूवी में, बट स्टिल दे आर ट्रीटेड एज सपोर्टिंग एक्टर्स ओनली. मेन लीड एक्टर्स अलग उनकी लाइमलाइट ले जाते हैं. फॉर एग्जाम्पल जैसे मूवी थी ओ माई गॉड, उसके अंदर परेश रावल वॉज इन द मेन लीड, बट वॉट हैपेंड वॉज दैट अक्षय कुमार, उनका टोटल सीन 12 मिनट्स का था पूरी मूवी में, बट ही वॉज ट्रीटेड एज द मेन लीड एक्टर एंड परेश रावल को मिला बेस्ट एक्टर इन सपोर्टिंग रोल. So, sir, what is your take on this? Is it fair? Has it ever happened to you?
I won't get into any particular film, but what you're saying is true. Very often, actors who are playing the lead roles, if they're not stars, are not given the importance, respect, and rewards that they should get. That happens a number of times. The nature of the business is star-driven. Its economics are based on stars. So it's not right what happens, but it does happen. And it's sad that it happens. But the fact of the matter is, whether publicity treats an actor fairly or not, those who see the film, वो तो जान जाते हैं कि पिक्चर किसकी है, कहानी किसकी है, एक्टर सबसे अहम कौन सा है. They know. And since you know about this film and you feel about this film, a lot of people will feel about that as well. So, in the end, for people who matter, बात सबको समझ आ जाती है कि असलियत क्या है और वहाँ दूध का दूध पानी का पानी हो जाता है.
Thank you so much. May I request Unnati ji to please take over and deliver the vote of thanks.
Thank you, Kabir. Thank you so much for being here. We were really thrilled to listen to you and just watch your journey, what you were saying. We were just mesmerized. And we were sitting here watching everything. A lot of questions also coming to me on my personal phone also regarding your speech today, whatever you are saying. And I would love to thank you. I would love to thank all the SAS women in Indore, those who are attending this program, and Prabha Khetan Foundation for giving us this opportunity. Thank you so much. And soon we'll be together with the next chapter.
Thank you, Nati. Thank you, Parveen, for your lovely questions. Thank you, Apra. Thank you, all the people connected with the Prabha Khetan Foundation for making this possible. It's been a wonderful chat, and I hope you felt good about this chat and you learned things even in the chat. I hope, and those of you who haven't read this book, take the trouble to read it. I hope that those who read the book have gained a greater insight into the book, and I look forward to coming together and talking to you on this forum at some other time, some other occasion. But thank you for this opportunity. Thank you so much.
It's a pleasure. And on this note, we'd really like to say a big thank you to our sponsors, Sri Cement, and to our print media partners, Nai Dunya also. Thank you so very much. Have a nice day ahead, all of you.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Have a great day.
Thank you.